I'm working on a bigger piece. This is going to be 12-inch by 12-inch square that's going to fit inside of a mat. And I've just measured the mat. I marked out already my 12-inch square, but on the mat, and I think most of the times that's how they're cut, even though they're marked as being a 12-inch opening, you want to come in about, it looks like a 1/4 inch on each side. And so I was going to do, excuse me, an outline around the edge of this piece. So I want to make sure it's going to show up inside the mat. So I have some different rulers, T-square, quilting square, just different things I can use to get a nice edge for that border. And then I have microns that are different sizes. Looks like a double up 5, 1, and this should be, yeah, it's an 5. So these are going to be permanent with my watercolor, and I'm going to do kind of a braided looking edge here and then do aspen leaves in the center. I have a branch off the aspen tree, and I'm looking at how I want to lay the leaves out on here. Some leaves are more pointed, some are more rounded. There's different sizes, small leaves and bigger leaves. Some have more curl in them. So I'm just going to arrange it until it looks the way I want it to come out. I think I'm aiming for sort of a heart swirl, if that makes sense. We'll see if it works out that way. I have here the HB pencil and a kneadable eraser. I'm going to start arranging these aspen leaves and tracing around kind of a heart swirl. So not a hard heart shape, but rather almost maybe like a swooshing one, a loose impression of one. Now the leaves are separated from the branch and sort of into sizes. I took out the ones that weren't quite a nice shape or healthy looking anyway. There was a few that just didn't want to use those. So now I will start with the largest ones and put them into roughly the shape I want, and then I can outline them. Most of these leaves are outlined on here. It's pretty faint. I'm not sure if you can make it out, but I've just been outlining the leaves. I suppose they're rather like fingerprints and snowflakes, where each one's a little bit different. And so I thought it would be fun to just outline them and capture that unique shape to each one. Okay, so it's roughly rather a heart shape. And now that I have the large ones and the main shape marked out, I want to come back in with the smaller leaves and fill that shape out a little bit more. I've wet the palette, and now I'm going to take a stiletto brush and I'm going to wet just inside the shape of the leaf. That way the paint only travels to that section that I've wet down. The nice thing with the stiletto brush, it gives you a good point so you can get into those little detailed spots, but you also can press down a little bit sideways and end up larger area too. Oh, there goes my eraser. Have to reshape that so it won't roll away so easy, won't I? Alright, now the water is a little bit tinted, so you should be able to see better what I'm going to do. And I'm going to drop in, to start with, some yellow. And then add some red in hopes that it will blend in nicely with the yellow. And then I'll add some green. And because my drawing board here is angled, it's tilted so you can see that the water is puddling down at the lower point. So I can just come in here with a paper towel and pick up that extra water. And in fact, that leaves kind of a neat shape, doesn't it? So I'll just do that a little more. And I don't have quite as much green on there as I'd like. So I'm going to pull it directly from the paint in the palette without mixing it. Just fill out the edges, pull the green in where I want it to go. I've been adding color and thought maybe I should share what I've been doing here so you can see the process if you're interested. And these last few, what I've done, instead of wetting the leaf first, I'm just going in with the color. And there's quite a bit of water in the paint. I'm not putting the paint on very strongly. And keep in mind that watercolor does tend to dry lighter. So I'll probably need to darken some of these areas up later. That looks like it needs a little yellow added to it. And if you notice, that yellow pushes the green away. Some of those, like the Azo, A-Z-O, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it will push the other colors away from it. Let's see what the Sinalia yellow does. Now that red, I see like it did over here, it has some pigment, grit, I guess is the right word. It has a little grittiness to it, which I'm not real fond of with watercolors, but in some cases, and this may be one of them, where that gives a nice little bit of texture to the leaf. And this looks like, for right now, the last one I have drawn out on the board. And I had an art teacher that taught me that you should move the brush in the direction of the texture you want. So in this case, a leaf, you would move it from the center out, and it almost makes its own suggestion to your eye that that is what it is, gives it a little bit more I don't know, texture, whatever you want to call it. And it's almost dimensional what it does, isn't it? Just adding some layers of paint. One thing when you start off as dark as those are, it's not quite so easy to add some layers, but it can be done. But when you have them as pale as this, it's easy to come back and add a little bit of this and that. can drop in some other colors while it's wet too. And they still blend in with each other. Traditionally, you put the background in first. I've always preferred to put the subject in and then work the background in around it. So this section had gone down much deeper, intense color than I intended. So I'm just picking it up and spreading it around, adding a little more green. And trying to work so that I'm not leaving hard edges. Softening the edges up as I go. The leaves are dry enough now, they shouldn't be bleeding into this background color. But I don't want the background color to be so strong that it fights for attention with the actual subject of the leaves. So I started with the blue, adding some green, a kind of a blue-green, whereas the aspen leaves are more of a yellow-green, so they should stand out better. And where it's starting to dry and those hard edges are forming, I can just come back in with this wet brush and move those edges a little bit, kind of blend those edges so they're not quite a hard line. And when it starts to get dry like that, I just get some more water. In a way, it almost feels like drawing with this brush and paint around these edges of the leaves. This is another angled brush that I enjoy using. It's pretty soft. It feels nice to use. It has a lot of flexibility. So the background's had some time to dry, and typically blues dry quite a bit lighter, but this is still pretty intense, and I'm guessing it's because it's the Sennelier. That's just this beautiful, lovely, intense color. But for a background, I need it to not be competing with the leaves. My first thought was to use some purples, and I may still yet do that, but I'm going to start with ultramarine and Payne's Gray mixed together and just see, and then maybe use the purple for shadows under the leaves, because look at that, does make a difference. And you may notice that I've already been outlining the braided edge and the leaves. I've been using these brown microns. I started with the 01, but I'm now going in with the 05. And this is just wet paint on top of a dry background. I didn't wet it. Yeah, that makes quite a bit of difference. I've outlined the shadow areas with some purple, and I'm going to loosen this up a little bit. That's a little strong, and it moves pretty nicely. There, it's not quite so hard-edged now. That looks better. What do you think? And then I'd like to just go in, pick up some of the color off my palette and kind of give, maybe here, some outlines of the leaf veining. I thought I would go in and define more of the leaf with the ink, but I think I'm happy with how it is. I think it's time to move on to the next project.